Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Earful Tower podcast, a show that's all about Paris, France, language, travel, all that kind of good stuff when it comes to France. And it's hosted by me, Olivier, an Australian bloke who has called Paris home for about 5 years. Maybe you're listening, who knows, maybe you're on the other side of the world, maybe you're in Hawaii, maybe you're 12 hours time difference. Is that a clue for the Gmail I'm going to read out at the end of the episode? Well, I don't know, but let me tell you, this show here is brought to you by French Today. It's an audiobooks company. You'll surely know the voice of Camille, who is the voice of the audiobooks. She has a spot every month on this show, but she's unfortunately rather ill and she's lost her voice. But never fear, her husband Olivier has stepped in. We spoke just this morning about the concept of being bilingual, or in his case, quadrilingual. Imagine that. We talk about the idea of bringing up a child speaking two languages and the benefits that that can have, the advantages, the difficulties, trying to convince a kid that it's cool to speak another language can be hard, apparently. But also, I want to address something that I said towards the end of the chat, is I sort of suggested that being bilingual can prevent Alzheimer's. I feel like I said prevent Alzheimer's. Let me just get this right. It can't prevent Alzheimer's, but it can delay the onset of the symptoms as much as 5 years. The most recent research suggests that the people who suffered from Alzheimer's have the same physical deterioration of their brain, whether they're monolingual or bilingual, but the people who speak two languages don't exhibit the typical symptoms of Alzheimer's, such as memory loss, confusion, and difficulties with problem solving and planning, until much later than those who only speak one language. There's the official word on it. But yeah, anyway, the benefits are seemingly endless, and that's what you're going to hear about today. Hang around at the end of the episode for a little bit of Gmail. But before we start, I just want to say, last night, I had a really wonderful night. I'm in the city alone, my wife's away, and it was getting sort of towards sunset time, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to go for a stroll in Montmartre, because luckily I live up there. And I walked, this idea of being a flaneur, wandering aimlessly, I did that. I never walk slowly. I'm a fast walker, but I walked about a quarter the speed that I usually do. I walked right through the heart of the touristy bit, up by the Place du Tertre, where all the artists are painting. I walked over to the Sacré-Cœur Cathedral, or Basilica, if you want to call it by its real name, the Basilica, and the sky was pink. The sky was beautiful and pink, and I'm no photographer, but I pointed my camera and took a picture of that domed cathedral. Okay, it's a basilica. Gee, every time I call it a cathedral, someone writes in. I took a picture of that basilica and didn't put any filters on it or anything. It was pink. The sky was pink. So there's a little tip. Go and check out Facebook or Instagram and have a little follow so that you can see that picture for yourself. And then I walked back home slowly, really slowly, dragging my feet slowly, bought a crepe, put on Spotify and Charles Aznavour, the French singer, and I looked around at all these tourists, so many of whom were so happy to be there, like young lovers or just people who were in love with Paris, walking around with big smiles on their faces and eyes lit up with the love that Paris brings. Maybe it was the pink sky, and I thought, I'm in the right place. So, luckily for you guys out there who listen to the podcast, you're sitting in the right place because you're about to listen to another episode. Here comes Olivier. If you like this show, do two things. Sign up on Patreon and support, as Olivier does, but also consider getting a French Today audiobook. FrenchToday.com/earful8. Check it out. Here comes Olivier and a little intro music from Slim and the Beast. Hello, Olivier.
Bonjour, Olivier.
Bonjour, ça va?
Très, très bien, et toi?
Oui, en forme, merci. You don't, you sound different, Camille.
Yeah, I've little throat problems.
But funny that you say that. That's actually what's happening with your wife right now, isn't it?
Yes. Unfortunately, she's not going to be speaking much for at least a few weeks, yes.
Yikes, that's not very conducive to podcasting, is it?
No, not at all.
But fortunately, you're a great guest in your own right. Some might say there's no one better to talk to when it comes to being bilingual and bilingualism and bilingual children. Do you think that's fair?
That's a very nice thing to say, but yeah, I'll take the compliment, yes.
Well, let's start with putting some... First, let's start with a bit of a background, what we sort of talked about before we pressed record. Just explain, sort of give us the run-through of your childhood and all these languages that were going in. You weren't born in France, but you're French.
So I'm half Greek, half French, from a Greek father and a French mother.
Right.
But I left Greece very quickly, and 9 month old. And I grew up mostly in French-speaking Africa, in Senegal, Ivory Coast, and all those countries. So I basically, French is my mother language, but very quickly I learned Greek from my father.
Right.
And then age 13, we moved from Africa to Spain, and there were no French schools there. And so my mom, who was always a fan of the English school system, put me into an English school. English international school. So basically, I arrived at that school and I had 6 months of intense English studies,
Right.
and learned Spanish at the same time. So
That's
So that's-
insane. So by the age of what, 15, you could speak 4 languages?
yes.
So you're not bilingual then. What are you, quadrilingual?
Quadrilingual, yeah. Except I
Quadrilingual?
have this weird thing where it seems like my memory, my brain has only space for 3 languages.
Wow.
And so the Greek and Spanish basically need to be like a computer. They need to be reinstalled every time I need it. So if I'm in Spain, there's no way I can speak Greek, and if I'm in
Right.
Greece, there's no way I can speak Spanish. So there's a weird thing. English and French are fine, but it's that third language that's always tricky for me.
I find this stuff so interesting, and my theory for myself was that I only had space for 2 languages. So you've one upped me there. But I remember when I moved from Sweden to Paris, every time it felt like every time I learned a new French word, I forgot a Swedish word.
Yeah.
And that's pretty annoying. Or do you find I sometimes okay, this happened to me the other day trying to speak French. It was a really basic word. I went into I remember what it was. I went into a restaurant, a Montmartre restaurant it said jazz music every Thursday 9 p.m. I walked in 5 minutes to 9, and I said to him, and you can tell me where I went wrong, because I definitely went wrong, but I said, do you have jazz music? Vous avez le jazz ce soir? And he's like, no. Pas du tout. And I wanted to say, oh, is it just all the other Thursdays? And the word for other, I guess in French would be autre, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I said the Swedish word andra. So I said, ah oui, c'est tous les andres jeudi, like that.
Right.
And he just looked at me like I was an idiot. And I looked at him like, what do you not understand? You're the idiot, Do you find the
Exactly.
same thing, that you slip words of other languages in without realizing it?
So absolutely not in French or English. So French and English are really completely bilingual. I mean, I can switch mid-sentence. But definitely when I try, if I'm not in a context, if I'm not in Greece and I'm trying to come up with a Greek sentence, then yeah, some of the Spanish words will actually pop in.
Yeah.
Because also the sound-wise, I think Greek and Spanish have some similarities in the sounds, and so that trips me up also.
Greek and Spanish have similarities.
And some of the sounds I find, yeah, and some of the pronunciations, yeah.
Wow. You know what's lucky for you? Except when you read Greek, they use the Latin alphabet as well, or do they? I know they have a Greek alphabet.
No, they use the Greek alphabet, yeah. And
Oh,
actually,
man.
funny thing is, I don't really read Greek. I've never formally studied it. It was all by learning it from the context and from my father's side of the family.
Yeah.
So I can read very slowly uppercase letters because the lowercase are different.
Oh my!
And
It's
I
like you have to learn 2 languages.
And
to
I
read.
absolutely cannot write it at all. Absolutely not.
Oh my! Well, I think a lot of people would be wondering which your favorite language is to speak.
It's a good question. I love Spanish. I have just the sound and the just the quality of Spanish. I absolutely love. Greek is beautiful too. French is beautiful. That would be the order probably. And English maybe last.
What's the? Sorry to do a half-hour
I'm
podcast
sorry, yes.
with you. What's your favorite language to swear in? If you swore, let's just assume you were a swearing kind of guy.
Actually, English is the
Yeah.
best swearing language.
Yeah.
I find that in English, you can swear a lot more, and it doesn't sound as bad.
Yeah, Camille and I
You
talked
know?
about that.
Yeah.
She says, except I remember she was telling a story when she was in Boston, when she was dropping the F word at a post office or something, because she struggled to get the, I guess the mood right, figuring out which is, and it's the same in French, right? She says a lot of people who are learning French drop swear words like they're, like they're going out of fashion when perhaps they
Well,
shouldn't.
because in their, I assume English speaking mind, swearing is a lot more accepted.
Mm.
You know, for example, you see the movies with, Seth Rogen and all these types of movies where, in you listen to them in English and it's like, swear word every 2 seconds.
Mm.
And then you listen to the French translation of the movies and it does not work at all because the French absolutely don't have this relationship with swearing as English do.
That's really interesting. So what do they sort of just gloss over it? Does that mean the characters I think it'd be a fantastic conversation to talk to one of the dubbers, the people who
absolutely. Those people are amazing, yeah.
Cuz isn't it true that like there's one guy who does all the Tom Cruise movies?
So in France, you
Yeah.
associate each actor with a particular dubber voice.
Yeah.
To me, when I grew up, it was Eddie Murphy, right? This one guy does all Eddie Murphy movies
Yeah.
in French. And if you've never seen them in English, then you assume that's Eddie Murphy's English voice. And if you hear it in another movie, then you go, oh, that's Eddie Murphy.
That's so weird. And I think it must be weird if you've seen, for example, I know a lot of French people even still watch Friends, the TV show.
Oh, absolutely. Very popular.
Right? But if you're watching that dubbed, you think you know what Ross and Rachel sound like. Then when you see, if you watch a YouTube video of Ross, David Schwimmer on David Letterman or something, they'd be like, what? Is that his voice? Is that his real voice? Isn't that odd? Don't you think that's odd?
I think it's very common for people who are used to dubbed movies.
Yeah.
For an English speaker who are used to just hearing everything, the original, that's odd. I think for a French person or it's really it's kind of normal.
Mm. What about one thing that I think I've talked with Camille about before is children and bilingual children, and that's how you're raising your daughter, who
Yes.
14 years old, am I right?
So she's 14 and a half. And actually, last week I picked her up at the Charles de Gaulle airport coming back from the U.S. So she goes to the U.S. every summer for that immersion into English. And yeah, we do raise her bilingual, absolutely. And she is absolutely bilingual.
So I want to ask this. I reckon there'd be a lot of listeners right now who specifically clicked on this episode, as the bells chime in the background for me, who specifically picked this episode because they're going to, or they're in the process of, or they're thinking about raising a child bilingually. If your daughter is 14 and a half and totally bilingual, how did you do it and what would you recommend?
So I think there's several scenarios, right? So a bilingual child can be bilingual because parents come from different countries and each have their own language. So that's one setup, right? So let's say that the father is French and the mom is Spanish, and the kid is raised in France. Then a lot of bilingual families will have one of the parents speak their native language to the child. So that's one scenario, and that's a very common scenario. The other one is which is the one we found ourselves in when we lived in the U.S. and our daughter was born, is that Camille and I are French, spoke French. That's our native language. We lived in an English-speaking country. And Layla early on went to daycare in English, and we had some nannies that for date nights that came in, and so they were all English. So that's a whole different scenario where you are in a country, but at home there's a different language spoken.
Right. So you're kind of like almost like you're on French soil in your household.
It's like a mini embassy, exactly.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
So the different scenarios. So, for example, I know that bilingual kids that are raised by two different parents of different language very often will associate a language with a particular person. And once that, I don't know, let's call it imprint is done, then it's really, really hard for them to switch. So, and they do this for their parents. So one kid will speak, one language with the father, one language with the mom, and just, that's always the case. And then when new people are introduced, like grandparents, even friends, there's one language associated with each person. And then that kid has really a hard time actually speaking a different language, even though that kid can master both languages.
Right, right.
So that is a common problem. This we did not have that with Layla. She seemed to be very open to speaking both French and English to both her parents. So that's nothing we faced, But it is a common thing with bilingual children.
It reminds me a bit of like baby ducks. Like they when you said imprint, it makes me
Yeah,
think,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah. If you go and pick up a baby duck, it'll think that you're its mother, right?
Exactly.
So you kind of, I think I've heard of stories in Paris where they'll send their baby or whatever to like a Spanish nanny or something, so that the nanny's language can rub off on the kid.
Absolutely. That's one of a technique. I have some friends in the US that do that. Absolutely.
And do you think, like for Layla, your daughter, we can call her Layla now. Now we've.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Did she struggle with that concept? Were there times when she got confused, or was it just straight up imprint, like you said?
So I think the key, what really was the key, the problem with we faced with Layla is that we actually we switched it 2 times, meaning that we lived in the U.S. and so at home we spoke French and we tried to, she was immersed in English in every, with all her friends, with everything outside the home. And at home, it was French. So at some point, she basically told us, why am I learning French? It's so tough. So even at that age, right, already, they know that French is so much harder. And I think that's the key when you raise a bilingual children, when you raise a child in the hope of them being bilingual, is that you need to have a good reason and a good motivation for the kid. And so, and that conversation Layla had with Camille, and Camille had a brilliant response. Why? She said, yes, I agree with you that French is tougher to learn. It is for everyone. And then she said, but French is the language of my family, is the language of your dad and I. So it's the language of love, and it's the language I associate with the people I love. And that seemed to work, so you need to find some sort of motivation. You can't just say, oh, you've got to learn those 2 languages. Why? You have to find some sort of motivation to kind of, so the kid can wrap their head around and say, why do I have to learn these 2 things and make my life harder? And then what happened is when we moved back to France 4 years later, we arrived in France and Layla spoke French with an English accent, which was kind of hilarious. We never heard it while we were in the U.S., but we saw recordings of her years later, and we got, oh my God, she has an American accent when she spoke French. And we arrived in France, and now we flipped it around, meaning that at home we tried to speak English. And
you guys speak English at home?
So we try. We don't succeed, but we at least all the TV we watch is in English.
Wow.
And because then now it was the reverse. We were in France. Everyone around was speaking French, so we had to keep her English up.
That's crazy.
So motivation is the key. Is really the key.
Did she find that still? I mean, 14 and a half is quite it's a delicate age. Does she find that she's the French kid in America, and does she find that she's the American kid in France? And does that,
So what is interesting is
to
that
her?
she left. She left when she was 4 years old, the U.S. And we're all 3 of us are U.S. citizens, and she really strongly identifies as American. Her American side is something that she really, really identifies with. And I think part of it is because that makes her kind of special. So there is definitely at that age, like you say, they. Kids, want to differentiate themselves. They want to have something, unique, and so that's part of it. And 2 is I think she realized early on how fantastic it is to be able to, at a very young age, be completely bilingual, especially in a language like English, which is the worldwide language. So, so I think it's just a combination of both.
What do you think? And I know you didn't raise Layla like this, but maybe the way you were raised. If a lot of people who do like mixed couples, so like you said before, a Spanish and a French, or in my case, an Australian and a Swede, if we had a kid, and I'm speaking English and the wife is speaking Swedish,
Mm-hmm.
then what are the parents meant to speak to each other? And will the kid get confused?
No. I think you can't walk on eggshells, right? So you have to do also what's natural. If the kid feels that every interaction is forced or unnatural, it's just not going to work. So you can, you and Lena, you speak. What language do you speak when nobody's around?
The language of love, Olivier. No, we speak English.
English. So keep speaking English.
Yeah.
And then maybe if it's a conversation between the three of you that started in Swedish, then keep going in Swedish, but then you can flip around and switch back. I think the advantage of bilingual kids, their brain is that they really can do. We always feel, are they going to get confused? Isn't going to be too many things to remember? Not at all. I mean, the brain is absolutely an amazing thing. And yes, bilingual children tend to speak later than monolingual children. That's just because they need a bit more time to kind of reorganize to organize their brain cells and their. But once they do, there's no confusion at all, and for them it's so natural.
And there's been all kinds of studies about people who speak two or more languages seem to have fewer run-ins with things like Alzheimer's and that kind of stuff as
Absolutely.
well, right?
And an interesting thing also that's a byproduct of bilingualism is increased empathy.
Wow.
And let me tell you why. Being a bilingual child, and having to be in two different environments with two different languages makes you realize that people express the same things in different ways. And that, that in French you can do something, in English you can do something, and they're the same things. And so that's something that we've found in Layla and in other friends of ours that have bilingual children, is that they kind of realize that they can put themselves in people's place when there are problems, because they kind of empathize and they realize how communication is key, and then how the same different languages have different communication levels and different challenges, and so it helps them out in the long run, which is amazing.
I wonder if people who speak many languages and who are empathetic like this tend to work in fields or in jobs that focus on communication and that kind of, way.
Yeah. I don't have any studies or anything, but yeah, I mean, that would sound like, definitely the job that I had before I worked on French Today. It was definitely being, it was in the tech field, but I was pretty much a product manager, which is a translator between sales and marketing and engineering, because I can actually speak, it's still in one language, but actually can speak their different, styles of English.
I think that's really fascinating. I think even learning, like trying to learn, and I'm sure that a lot of people listening right now are learning French. And in fact, I'm sure a lot of people are using French today who are listening right now who are probably not familiar with your voice yet.
Yes,
Olivier.
I'm hidden in one audiobook only.
But these people who are learning French, I think even learning a language can help you be more empathetic when you're talking to other people. Just the idea, like when you're getting used to the idea of this difference. I'm not even sure that's necessarily just a bilingual thing. Like when you've broached that, or when you've started to learn and you understand, how great the differences can be, but we're all trying to talk to each other. I think that
Absolutely.
can also
and also you learn that there are challenges, right? Because when you start learning and speaking a language, you can't express yourself correctly. You're not your true self, and so that makes you realize that other people in different situations might feel the same way, and so that then you suddenly put yourselves in their shoes and you go, oh, okay, that's why that person has had a hard time. And it's not just a language; it could be somebody with a speech impediment, or
Right.
or and suddenly you go, oh yeah, I remember, because I had struggles trying to express myself, and so I now understand what their frame of mind is and what their troubles are, and so I can actually now accept it and be much more lenient towards that behavior.
Did you find it a difficult childhood? Like take yourself back to when you were Layla's age. So when you were 14, I guess you were in Spain juggling 4 languages.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel? I mean, you said you were at an international school, right? But did you feel like
Yes.
you were an outsider?
Oh no, I was lucky enough to be in an international school, and so my friends were Australians, Swedes, actually a lot of Swedish friends actually,
Right.
and all different countries. So that was no that's the advantage of being in a bilingual school. I imagine if I were in a Spanish school when I was in Spain, it would have been a bit more problematic, absolutely.
I
But I
think.
think that's just it would have taken I think it would have been harder at the beginning, and then it would have been fine I think.
What about like reading books and we talked about watching movies before. As someone who can speak 4 languages, Olivier, do you find yourself with preferences? Like if a dubbed movie comes on the TV, will you go, "Oh, I'm not watching that disgusting dubbed rubbish"? Like, do you have a
Yeah,
proclivity?
but that's more of a snobbish thing.
I can't watch dubs. I
Oh.
literally can't watch dub stuff. I can't. I watch if I'm in a hotel or something in
Hmm.
France, because I never really come across TVs in France for some reason except hotels. When I see it, I can't. I just can't.
Yeah,
I
we're
think
we're it's really hard to once you associate a voice with a particular person, it's really hard.
are we
It's part
snobs,
it's part
Olivier?
of their personality. I think I actually what is snob is when you're watching let's say an English movie with the French subtitles, and then you turn around to the person next to you and you go, oh, the way they translated that is really really bad. That's really snobbish.
That's funny. Oh God. What about the movies and stuff? Do you find a preference for American books or French books or?
So yeah, once you're fully bilingual, the preference is to read or listen to a movie in the language it was created in.
Mm,
So even watching a Spanish movie or I prefer to watch a Spanish movie even if sometimes they speak a little bit too fast and I still need a little bit of subtitles, but I'd
mm,
rather see that. When you're a child, uh, I think children learn by hearing a lot by repetition, and I think that it's important to have the language so in France, Layla and us actually watch basically only English content.
mm,
When we were in the U.S., we bought all the French DVDs, Disney and all this, and
yeah.
Layla basically learned some very complex sentences, which she did not really kind of master the grammar or any of it, but she just repeated. Like I remember from Mowgli, the Jungle Book.
Yeah.
She one day she basically she was like 3 and she repeated the sentence, which was really really pretty
Do you
pretty
remember the Do you
complex.
remember the sentence?
It's I can't remember. I know it's when the snake basically hypnotizes Mowgli and it says it hypnotise and you have your 3-year-old using the word hypnotise and we were
Yeah.
like oh, and so listening to English music, to English movies. So in that case, right? I mean, or whatever language you're trying to be bilingual in, I think is very, very important. As an adult, it's different. As adults, movies and things, it can be frustrating. As children, and also with simpler content like Disney movies
Mm,
and all kinds of
mm.
things, then just the repetition of the words really create a wonderful thing for the bilingual child.
I found that even as an adult learning languages, watching Disney, especially the songs, like you go on
Mm-hmm.
YouTube and you watch, something from the Jungle Book or Aladdin or whatever, because they often do a really good job with the translations into French or Swedish or whatever. And because you know those songs from your own childhood, then you kind of already have a. It's like reading a book that you read in English and then reading it in French. You got that kind of background cheat sheet going on in the back of your head.
Absolutely, you have the context. Yeah.
Yeah. You'll be proud of me, by the way, Olivier. I bought, for the first time, I got a French book that I've started to read for pleasure.
Wow, good. That's
How
good.
about
I'm
that?
proud of you, Oliver. Very
Thank
proud of
you.
you.
Although I kind of cheated in that it's Georges Eddy, the basketball commentator that I had on the show
Yes,
about.
yes, you had on the show,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I got his memoir, so I feel like because he's American and it's about something I already know. I don't know. It still counts,
It's in
right?
French. You're still. It counts. You're reading it in French. It still counts.
All right, Olivier. Time's winding up and it's getting away from us quickly. So I figured we could kind of end on if you could give one sort of takeaway tip for the two young parents listening to this from two different languages with a baby on the way. What would you say to them?
I think one is don't overstress it. You know, each child will process the different languages or the approach differently. So you can't, have your whole plan determined as a baby. You have to see how that baby evolves and how they handle the multi languages. Get your think about why your child should be bilingual. Have a very good answer for the day they ask you the question, because that's if you cannot motivate your child, then you've kind of lost it. So you really need to go deep and find like a very good reason for them to be bilingual, and then also kind of make them, as you raise the kid, make them feel proud of being a bilingual. I know that in some immigrants families, children try to stay away from the native language just to integrate a bit more. So you need to kind of really try and instill that sense of pride. And then when they're a little bit older, the practicality of it. So I think it's a lot about attitude. Not the approach can be different, but it's really about the attitude and how the confidence of the parents trying to get the bilingual children started.
That is a good answer, Olivier. Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
I shall also say thank you for being the sponsor of this show.
It's our pleasure.
Everyone out there already knows, but I'm going to say it again. If you want... Now, everyone out there, you're not going to hear Olivier's voice except once. You know who it is. It's Camille. She's on the show every month. But if you want to learn French with French Today, go on frenchtoday.com/earful8 and you'll get a further 10% off all their audiobooks. But thank you for being the sponsor, Olivier. But I've got an extra thing to say. Thank you for being a long-time Patreon supporter.
Oh yes, it's again our pleasure. I think we love supporting content creators that have interesting approaches, original approaches. So yeah, we were Patreon supporters before we were sponsors.
Is it true that you're going to make it to the Australian ambassador's residence in October, dressed in, what did you say you're going to be wearing?
In French Today matching tuxedos. No, maybe. Well, we might not pull that one out, but yeah, we will definitely. Camille and I will be there. I need the next morning. I need to rush back to Paimpol to then take my mom to a Sting concert in Nantes the same night for her birthday.
Oh, wow.
But we will be there, absolutely.
Are you also going to go to the Sting concert?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's going to put pressure on me. I'm glad I'm going up the night before Sting and not the night after. But I'm looking forward to seeing you then. I guess that might be the next time I see you, Olivier. But thank you for being on the Eiffel Tower podcast and for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Okay, au revoir.
Au revoir, Olivier.
Well, there you have it. That was Olivier, husband of Camille, the regular guest on this show, and talking about bilingualism. So don't forget that, frenchtoday.com/earful8. But what I figured is I'd do a little bit of Gmail, which if you're new around here, that's when someone writes in to me, Oliver G, and they say, I've got a little email for you. And I thought I'd read out this one from Carl Carlson, which is a wonderful name, Carl Carlson. Very typical for Scandinavia, which might come back in this email. Okay, love your podcast. We may be the furthest from Paris as we live in Kona, Hawaii. Kona, Kona. I'm not sure that you are the furthest though, Carl. I think we have listeners in Fiji. I got someone from Hobart in Tasmania the other day. I'm not sure if you are the furthest, but 12 hours time difference, that is pretty good. So it says, we're 12 hours time difference, and we come to France every year. We've done so for about 30 years. Wow, that's magnificent. We'll be in France from, I assume you've got someone else with you there, Carl. We'll be in France from September 4th through September 26th. We do an annual pilgrimage on portions of the Camino de Santiago, and we'll start in Aire, sur Adour this year, ending in Saint-Jean-de-Pied-de-Port. And yes, I guess I need to stop freeloading and become a Patreon supporter. This is especially true as both my wife and I are part of the Swedish diaspora and must be distant cousins of lovely Lena. Please keep up the good work. Too many stars. I love it. So, I responded to Carl and I said, you meant to add a question to these emails. If I'm going to read it out, you got to add a question. And so he did. He said, I've got too many questions, but why don't you ever do a podcast on Le Train Bleu, the blue train? So if you guys who don't know it, it's the restaurant out by Gare de Lyon, really beautiful restaurant that was recommended by John Baxter in a very early episode of this podcast. He says, Art Deco out of the way, but typical Paris, and the food is good. By the way, we'll go to the Red Wheelbarrow bookshop and buy something other than Hemingway. Well, Carl, that's a really good idea. I've been meaning to do episodes on places in Paris. I've been meaning to do that for ages. So places like Le Train Bleu or even the Eiffel Tower or, specific buildings or restaurants. My favorite building is the Hôtel de Ville, the city hall. And I went to the new tourist information bureau that's in the bottom floor of it yesterday. And what I bought a magazine about the town hall. That's what I did, which is a pretty weird thing to do when you think about it. But I like this idea, so I'll take that on board. Carl, thank you very much. And I didn't even pressure him, but he signed up on Patreon. He became a Patreon supporter. So we can imagine that $10 per month, that first $10 that you've just signed up for, went to the cost of that magazine, Carl. So thank you for contributing to the show. That's exactly how it exists, really, thanks to people like you. But thanks for your email. And usually here's where I'd speak a little bit about the sponsor, but seeming the sponsor has been on for the whole episode, and you already know about French Today, I'll end with a note that after this summer, I'm either going to go down to one episode a week, or I'm going to keep doing 2 episodes a week, and you guys are all going to sign up on Patreon. The choice is in your hands, but I'm going to give it a shout out. It's $10 a month, $10 US. It's about €8, I suppose. And for that, you get all the behind the scenes, all the live videos, extra podcast episodes. There's so much behind the scenes stuff that I've already filmed over the past, year and a half that you'll never catch up, and new stuff is coming all the time. Plus, you get that guidebook to Paris that I wrote, 150 Things to Do in Paris, as you sign up. So what are you waiting for? All you people who've heard about it, now's the time to sign up before the summer's over and, keep these cogs churning. Thanks for listening. I'm going to go for a long walk in Paris, as I seem to be doing all the time now, and I hope that you have a lovely day wherever you are. Au revoir.
I don't really know where we are. I just want